The highway ran on and on in front of me, a long gray ribbon under a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted sun or rain. I had been on the road since sunrise. It was the kind of drive that makes your body tired and your mind drift. On the back seat, wrapped in soft linen, sat a wooden keepsake box my father had carved years ago. Inside were silver candlesticks that had passed from my grandmother to me. I planned to give them to Darius that night, as my blessing for his engagement. His house was 12 hours away, but I told myself the distance was nothing compared to the years we had shared. When we were young, there had been no miles between us. I pictured us on the banks of Pine River with fishing poles too big for our hands, daring each other to catch the first perch. Darius used to cheat, tugging his line so I'd think he had a bite. I would laugh so hard my sides hurt. Somewhere between the flat fields of Illinois and the long green hills of Missouri, the memories kept me company. We had whispered secrets, under blanket forts, invented stories on long car rides, and leaned against each other when our parents argued in the kitchen. I thought about those nights he slipped into my room after a nightmare, saying he wasn't scared, only bored. That was the boy I wanted to see again, the one worth a half day on the road. The hours grew heavier as the highway narrowed and turned into smaller roads. Gas stations started to blend into each other, and coffee cups piled up on the passenger seat. My shoulders ached, but I kept a stubborn hope in my chest. Whatever time had built between us, I believed this dinner could be a bridge. An engagement was more than a date on a calendar. It was a new start. Maybe it could make us remember the old roots that mattered. By the time I reached his city, the sky had gone quiet and gray, the kind that holds its breath before rain begins. I adjusted the keepsake box on the seat beside me and whispered to it as if the candlesticks could hear me. This will be worth it. When I turned onto Darius's street, I felt exhaustion and anticipation press against my ribs as I rolled into his driveway. The neighborhood was calm, almost staged, every lawn trimmed to the same neat length, every porch wearing a matching wreath. Darius's house stood taller than I expected. Sharp lines, smooth surfaces, nothing like the old home we grew up in. I shut off the engine and rested my hands on the wheel, telling myself the long drive had been worth it. The wooden box felt heavier when I lifted it. I straightened my back, climbed the steps, and knocked. For a moment, there was only the muffled sound of laughter inside. Then the door opened. Maribel stood there, hand still on the knob. Her eyes widened for a breath, then settled into something steady and cool. She glanced past me, as if checking whether I'd brought anyone else, then looked down at the box in my arms. I brought something for the engagement dinner, I said, keeping my tone warm. She tipped her head and smiled a thin, polished smile. Oh, she said lightly. We had the dinner yesterday. The words fell hard, each one sinking deeper than the last. Yesterday? I asked, sure I'd misheard. Just close family, she added, as if that explained everything. The box burned against my skin. Behind her, I heard glassware clink, chairs scrape, and the easy murmur of people I was not meant to see. I stood still on the threshold, the space between us feeling like a wall. Her smile didn't change. She didn't move aside. I waited for Darius to appear and laugh, to say there had been a mix-up. The seconds stretched. No one came. Maribel shifted her weight and said, almost polite, maybe another time. Then she closed the door. It was quiet and final. I stood alone on the porch with nothing but the weight in my arms and the sound of voices that no longer included mine. Back in the car, the keepsake box sat on the passenger seat like a question I could not answer. My arms still ached from holding it on the porch, waiting for a welcome that never came. The porch light behind me glowed, but no one opened the door again. No one called my name. Only laughter floated through the walls, faint and distant, as if I had already been erased from the picture. I stared at my phone, half expecting a message from Darius, some explanation, or at least an apology. Nothing. The screen stayed blank, and the silence felt heavier than any words. My mind slid back through years of small moments. The birthday I drove hours to surprise him, only to find he had gone camping with Maribel's family. The calls he promised he would return but didn't. The weekend I covered a bill he said he'd handle. Each memory ended in the same quiet way. Me waiting, him gone. I started the engine and pulled away, the sound of gravel under the tires filling the space where a conversation should have been. The houses all looked the same as I drove past, windows glowing with families gathered at tables. Each lit room was a reminder of where I did not belong. At the edge of town, the highway stretched out like a dark ribbon with no clear end. I could not face the long drive home that night, not with the box still unopened beside me. I saw a small roadside motel with a tired neon sign buzzing against the dusk and pulled in. The room was silent. I set the box on the table and lay down on the stiff bed. My eyes traced the cracks in the ceiling while old memories pressed against the fresh sting in my chest. What had once been laughter and secrets between siblings was now only the sound of a door closing, leaving me with a quiet I had not chosen. The motel night thinned and then turned into morning, leaving me restless and hollow. When I finally drove home, my house felt colder than usual, the stillness almost like a choice made by someone else. I set the keepsake box on the hall table and did not lift the lid. Instead, I went to a desk drawer I almost never opened. It was plain wood, but I knew what was inside, the quiet history of what I had given up for Darius. The first envelope was smudged at the edges. It was the loan note I wrote by hand when he asked for help to start his first business. $12,000. The money I had saved for a new roof. He promised he would pay me back within a year. He said it was the beginning of something stable. The business shuttered before his plans had a chance to dry. The money never came back. Under that was a stack of papers stamped in red, property tax notices. The year he called nearly in tears, afraid he and Maribel were about to lose the house in Flagstaff. I wired $27,000 the next morning without even thinking. He said he would never forget what I had done and would make it right when they recovered. I never brought it up again, even as months stretched into years. Then there was the credit card, the one in my name, which he carried for emergencies. The balance rose and fell, but the pattern held steady. Dinners, flights, charges I never asked about. Every month I paid it, telling myself it was easier than starting a fight. I spread the papers across the desk. The numbers stared back like a list of trust I had misplaced. I could hear each promise in my head. I'll pay. You back? I won't forget this. You won't regret it. Sitting in the quiet of my house, the open drawer felt like a confession. The pages blurred, and for the first time in years, I wondered if my devotion had cost me not just money, but the respect I thought I had earned. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the documents still laid out. The numbers were no longer help. They were chains I had clasped around my wrists. My stomach turned. I picked up the credit card and held it. The plastic felt worn, the edges soft from years of being pulled from his wallet, swiped in places I had never been, paying for, meals I would never taste. My name was on the front. It had never truly belonged to me. I dialed the number on the back. The person on the line was kind and efficient, asking me to confirm my choice. Yes, I said, steady and clear. Cancel it. Effective now. A few keystrokes later, the line went quiet, and so did a weight I did not know I had been carrying. I leaned back in my chair, the air suddenly sharper and cleaner. For years, I had told myself that sacrifice was the same as love, that paying his debts and keeping the card open made me a good sister. But love that turns into obligation does not look like love for long. It starts to look like weakness. The house was still. After my husband Thomas died, that stillness used to crush me. Tonight it felt different. It felt like space being handed back. I thought about the years I had confused devotion with silence, the times I let guilt steer me. Maybe respect had not been missing from him. Maybe it had been missing from me. When I went to bed, I expected regret to keep me awake. Instead, I closed my eyes and slept quickly, light in my chest. For the first time in months, there were no dreams of doors closing in my face. 5 days passed before the phone finally rang. I was trimming the last roses of late summer when Darius's name lit up my screen. I watched it buzz twice before answering, remembering all the times my calls went unanswered. "Eloen," he said, voice tight. The card doesn't work. Did you forget to pay? There was no greeting, just panic. I heard voices behind him. Maribel, quick and sharp. Someone knocking at a door, a baby crying, papers rustling. The edges of his world sounded frayed. I tried it 3 times. He said, breath short. They say it's declined. We've got bills, people waiting. What's going on? The moment felt still and clear to me. No rush of fear, no need to fix anything. The card that had tied me to his emergencies no longer held me there. I canceled it, I said quietly. The line went silent, then crackled with disbelief. You what? You can't just… How are we supposed to… I breathed in the scent of cut roses. It was never meant to be yours, Darius. His tone jumped from anger to pleading. Just until I sort things out, I'll pay you back. I swear this time. Please, don't leave me like this. The old tug inside me did not answer. I let the quiet open up, filling the space where fear used to live. He waited for the version of me that rushed to soften the blow. She was gone. I forgot, I said, calm and even. Before he could reply, I ended the call. The roses at my feet looked brighter in the fading sun, as if they knew a weight had shifted. The calls didn't stop. He rang again that hour, and again, the next morning. His voice moved through anger, then good sense, then desperation, like switching masks. At first, there were hard-clipped words meant to corner me. Then came the soft reason I knew from childhood, the charm that could braid sweetness into guilt. Finally, the small voice of a boy asking me not to leave him. I listened, the way I had listened 100 times. I remembered his smile when he needed something, how it could make me doubt myself. For years, I believed him even when I shouldn't have, mistaking his need for closeness as proof of love. Standing in my kitchen with the phone at my ear, I felt the spell break. The charm no longer warmed me. It only showed me how much I had given without asking for anything back. Eloen, he said again, his voice cracking. You don't understand what's at stake. Just a little more time. I closed my eyes and let the quiet stretch until his words thinned into static. Then I spoke, soft enough for me to hear, the change in myself. Oh, I forgot. The silence that followed was heavier than anger and sharper than pleading. I ended the call. The house settled around me, not heavy, just still. For once, the choice was mine. It was not to save him. It was to save myself. I set the phone down, turned toward the window, and watched the last light fade, knowing the silence between us had shifted into something that would not go back to what it was. 2 days later, the messages began. Long lines of words trying to stitch themselves into excuses. Darius's tone swung from guilt to sorrow, to promises that sounded familiar and thin. I never meant to hurt you. You know I'll pay. You back this time. Don't give up on me. Then came, family shouldn't turn their back when things get hard. I read everyone without replying. They blurred into the same hollow tune I had heard for years. Once they had enough weight to bend me. Now they sounded like echoes in an empty room. When I opened my phone to distract myself, I saw Maribel's world bright and polished across the screen. Photos of dinner parties, glasses raised, captions full of joy. She tagged Darius in each one. Their smiles were perfect. The table was crowded. There was no sign of unpaid bills, no hint of missed calls, no shadow of the panic I had heard in his voice. It was a performance, for the world and for themselves. They could erase me with a smile, just as they had closed the door. The thought did not pierce me now. It clarified things. Their love had never been love without strings. It had been a leash that tightened each time I gave. I set the phone down and let the quiet return. For the first time, it did not feel like being abandoned. It felt like distance I had chosen. The keepsake box still sat on the hallway table, the wood glowing in the afternoon light. I brushed my hand over it and felt no rush to deliver it anymore. It was mine until I decided otherwise. Outside, the wind carried the first cool edge of autumn. I realized the season was changing around me as surely as I was changing inside. The life I had lived at their mercy was closing like a chapter. Something steadier was beginning. The weeks that followed moved with a calmer rhythm. Without Darius's charges slipping into my statements, I saw numbers I had not seen in years. What had been swallowed by his debts now belonged to me again. It felt like opening a window in a room I hadn't noticed was suffocating. My first choice was practical. I sent an extra payment toward my mortgage. Watching the balance fall felt good in a way that had nothing to do with math and everything to do with owning my life. This house, this roof, stood because of my work, not because I put myself behind someone else's needs. My second choice was for joy. I signed up for an art class at the community center, something I had always put off because there was never extra money. On Thursday night, the room smelled like paint and clay, and I sat among strangers who brought their own quiet hopes with them. Holding a brush again was like picking up a part of myself I had left behind. My third choice was for others. I wrote a check to the women's shelter downtown. Anonymous. Quiet. I knew what it felt like to give without being seen. This time, it wasn't about erasing myself. It was about standing with people who deserved to know they were not alone. Each act was small by itself. Together, they drew a new line. What had once been taken without thanks was now building something solid, something that belonged to me. As autumn deepened, I felt ready for what would come next. The call came late, after the house had settled into its gentle stillness. Darius's voice was low and heavy. It might have been regret. I could not be sure. He talked about mistakes, about pressure I couldn't understand, about wanting to do better. I let him speak. My silence was not a trap anymore. It was a boundary. When he paused, waiting for me to soften, I said only that I heard him. I did not offer more. After we hung up, I walked to the hall where the keepsake box rested. For weeks it had sat in plain sight, a reminder of what I had meant to give him, what I had believed would carry our family's history forward. I lifted it, carried it to my study, and opened the cabinet where I keep the things that matter most. I slid the box inside and turned a small brass key. It did not feel like a gift withheld. It felt like care, waiting for someone who would understand its weight and treat it with the respect it deserved. I stood with my hand on the drawer and realized that legacies are not passed on by blood alone. They are earned by respect, guarded by care, and given to those who prove they can hold them well. For years I had mixed up family with duty, love with sacrifice, and silence with loyalty. Now I could see them for what they were, choices I was free to make differently. The ground under my feet felt steady. I turned off the light and walked to my room, carrying not loss, but a new certainty about what it means to belong.